I'm Brandon Mihalides, and this is Chris Bowman. He's the project manager that we will be interviewing for this project. How are you doing today, Chris?
Good, thank you. Yeah, great to be here. Very excited.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so Dalton, you'd like to start?
Yeah. So, Chris, what kind of things do you prepare for before a day of work as a project manager?
Well, the big thing is you got to figure out what your team's doing for the day, right? So you want to look at what your daily priorities are. The first thing I love to do before I start any day of work is go through my emails, of course, just to kind of get all that out of the way. I'm a big proponent to really time chunking your emails, only checking it like 3 times a day versus checking it like constantly throughout the day, right? We use Slack for a team communication tool as well. So Slack is kind of like an MSN Messenger or some sort of messenger application, but it's team-based. So definitely go on there. You have to catch up with everything for the day. And then at that point, the developers usually have like a morning meeting, so just kind of make sure that everybody's on the same page for the day. So it's really kind of orientating everything for the day and making sure that priorities are being met.
All right. Cool.
All right, so have you always been a project manager, or did you become a project manager after a previous career?
Yeah, no, I definitely have not always been a project manager or managed really into any capacity until I got into web design, right? So when I worked in a studio capacity, my role was very much, we were a small team, right? So there would be different projects that we would manage. So there was 2 of us as designers for a very long time, and the one guy would do project management maybe on the one project, then I would do it on the second. So it was very kind of a part-time thing, right? When we moved into doing software as a service company, you have a much larger team, so project management is definitely like a bigger role at that point. So, yeah.
All right. Cool. So next question: did you need any sort of additional education, or was work experience enough to be in a management position?
It's a great question. So I took new media web design here, so there was a project management component of it. But as for like formal management education, I don't have it. So it's more just been kind of very much on the job learning and stuff like that. So I took a little bit of business and stuff like that when I was in college as well. So some of that would have helped. But just being in management roles and trying to really figure out managing people and how that works it's definitely a big learning curve when you don't have formal education. But it's been fun so far.
Kind of more of a learn as you go deal.
Yeah, it has been. It really has been. Yeah, I mean, you can take like a 4-month project management course, and that's definitely going to give you some of the tools to help you in your job. But managing people, it's definitely a lot more involved than that. So
Almost an art form.
definitely, yeah. And you're always learning, right? You're always kind of growing as a manager and stuff as different issues come up, especially if you're in charge of things like HR as well, because you're not just managing kind of productivity of a team, but now you're also managing like interpersonal conflicts between people and all that kind of stuff. So
Interesting.
yeah.
A lot bigger spectrum then.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, depends on where you're sitting, how large your team is, and what your role is. But yeah.
Oh, for sure.
All right, next question. So, ideally in team work-based projects, communication is a key factor. How do you ensure communication is maintained during project development? Use a system or through email?
Yeah, communication is definitely one of the hardest parts of the job, to make sure that people are communicating. Because we're a software as a service company, you definitely get to a point where when you start a project, for example, you have what's called a scope meeting. So that's when you're going to go through the team and basically everyone tries to get on the same page. It's really imperative that everybody takes their own notes during those meetings. We've learned that the hard way. One person takes notes, nobody references it. 2 weeks down the road, people are going in different directions, right? So great way to fail as a project manager. So everyone has to take their own notes. Of course, you have to take your own notes as well. And then you just try to facilitate daily communication. So we have daily touch points. We have a developer meeting in the morning, as I said. So that meeting is really only 5-10 minutes. It's very much, okay, what are you guys working on? Can I have some feedback on this and all that kind of stuff? So it's really kind of a inner developer meeting. The project manager is really just there to make sure everything is going in the right direction. But at that point, it's kind of between the developers. And then we also have like a touch point with the whole team midday as well, every day. And then usually once a week we have a bigger meeting where bigger issues kind of pull through. So aside from that, we have a document that's a living document that holds all of the original scope meeting, and then a kind of a living scope meeting, a scope, I should say, as the project goes on. So as maybe, we decide that we need to add an X feature because we didn't foresee this or whatever, right? So this kind of living document is going to hold all that, as well as, you know, who's working on it, what the rules are, all that kind of stuff. So all those are kind of really imperative that we keep on top of. And then the final piece of the puzzle would be Slack, which is the daily communication, where you have, in Slack you can have channels, so things can be isolated. So you can have, if you really need to, you can have like an actual whole channel dedicated just to that project, or just to maybe development, and then you kind of go back and forth. Actually, there's one other piece, which would be, we use a project management software called Trello, which is really, really simple. It's all card-based, but then we can contain everything to do with each individual project kind of there as well. So kind of your daily tasks and stuff can sit in that. So, and then team members basically kind of almost assign themselves to a card, or you assign them to a card. So that's like a little subset, like a micro feature on a bigger project. And they can move that into like a doing column, so then it kind of alerts the whole team that this person's working on this specific thing. So that really helps as well. Yeah, so it's communication is one of the biggest things. We have so many different tools for communication in today's day and age, but it's just making sure you're using them correctly and staying on top of them. We've simplified. We used to use more serious project management utilities. I've used Active Cloud before, Basecamp before. They work for some teams, but for us, we really like the simplicity of Trello. Everything's contained in each little kind of pocket. It's easy to move around. It's easy to keep track of what's been done. So, yeah, but it's all going to come down to the team and what they prefer.
Awesome. What kind of advice would you give someone looking to become a project manager? Like, what kind of road should they take, and like, what kind of characteristics they should know?
So to be a project manager, the biggest thing is you have to stay organized yourself, and you have to balance the line between micromanagement and leadership. That's one of the biggest things, right? So a project manager that's going to get themselves in a lot of trouble really quick and get the team really against them micromanages their team. So that's the person that's going to come in. They're going to say, you know, what are you working on here? What are you doing here? I think you should do this differently. And they really they constantly ask for checkups. It was almost like a no trust situation. It's very much like you could almost consider like an old school management kind of technique where you're managing people. So you're actually telling them kind of what to do and stuff. And a lot of developers get really siloed in that position. They get kind of resentful as well. Where more of a leadership role is you lead your team. So your team themselves, they're the ones with the expertise. They're the ones that might have the better experience and knowledge to do certain things. And you just make sure that they're on track, they have the right tools, that they know you trust them, and that there's definitely still communication, there's still touch points, but you give a lot more trust to them. So being able to balance that, how you learn that, aside from on the job or just, I don't know, reading some books or something, that's difficult for me to say just because I haven't had a lot of formal education in project management, but that's definitely some of the best advice I think I could give is, the fastest way to get your team resentful of you is to micromanage them. Right?
Yeah. Be a little bit more trusting of everybody.
Exactly, yeah. Take that leadership mentality, which is you're going to lead your team, you believe in your team, you know your team has the expertise, and you're going to facilitate them to get the job done, not manage them to get the job done. Right? Yeah.
All right. And what are some typical obstacles that you'd face as a project manager? And is there any stresses of the job that you bring home with you, or does it all kind of stay at work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So stresses would definitely be deadlines, and challenges are definitely deadlines. Yeah, and scope. So there's a thing called scope creep, and that's when you start a feature, you scope out an entire feature, and you say this feature is going to do X, Y, and Z. And then 2 weeks in, you're like, oh, we can also do this, and we can also do this, and we can also do this, and it just kind of keeps growing. What happens is people get really excited about these kind of micro features they can slip in development. Programmers love to get really excited about, hey, I can do this extra little thing, it's going to be so awesome for our users, right? And it sounds like a great win. The problem is they start to pile up on each other, and next thing you know, the feature's a month behind. The whole project's a month behind, right? Deadlines are extremely difficult as well, just because it's very difficult for a programmer to tell you how long it's going to take them. They might say, this feature is going to take me a day, and it ends up taking a day and a half. And then they also don't account in, okay, we also have to do quality assurance on that. So we have to have a testing team come in and make sure that there's no bugs. Well, they found some bugs. Okay, so now something that should have taken a day took them a day and a half to program, plus an extra day of testing, plus an extra day of bug fixing and retesting, right? So all of a sudden this thing has grown exponentially. And that's on one isolated piece. So can you imagine an entire project trying to manage that, right? So these are all the stresses that it definitely big parts of the job, I guess, that you try to have to overcome. And taking it home, it's so easy to take it home because, I mean, first of all, most people have email on constantly. So someone's going to email you, or you're going to get a message from Slack or something, for example, at night, and something is broken or whatever. As deadlines get closer, you get programmers that start to feel burnt out, and all that kind of stuff as they kind of loom. So yeah.
Drags it on even
Oh
more.
yeah. Yep.
Always wonderful.
Oh, yeah. So did you have any mentors while you were moving into project management, or what did you learn from them?
Yes and no. Not really mentors. It's just I'm not the only one. So at our team that does project management, so which is really helpful. So we can kind of lean on each other and kind of work together. Yeah. So I don't necessarily have any mentors in the way of like a formal mentor that I met with or anything like that.
So it's like a group learning process.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is probably a mentor would be very beneficial.
So then
in a
is there
situation.
Is there anything that you learned that you necessarily wouldn't have thought of on your own from one of the other people that you're a project manager with, Matt?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Especially when it comes outside of project management, into more like interpersonal conflicts and stuff like that within the team. Because I'm not just a project manager, I'm part of the management team as well. So when two people are just not talking or they're upset with each other for some reason, trying to deal with that situation, we've definitely learned a lot on how to do that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, it's been fun.
And do you follow a like constraint system, so like the triple or quadruple constraints in your everyday, or do you just kind of
Constraint system as in like a...
Like a quality, cost, time.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Yeah, so when we scope, that would be for scoping features, I guess. Trying to figure like a feature fits in, how long it's going to take, and all that kind of stuff. We're trying to move to more of an agile structure, but we've done a lot of things like a waterfall method, and where we don't actually scope, where we scope a feature and it's, yeah, that's tough. We don't really consider that as much as we should, that's for sure, yeah.
I guess if it works for you though, then.
Yeah, well, I mean, we read about all kinds of different like project management techniques and all that kind of stuff, and like how you're going to manage projects and how you're going to manage people going forward. Yeah, that's difficult. I guess really what we do is we step back and we look, okay, who is our core user? Like, who is our target user, right? Which is a really difficult question to answer sometimes. You think it might be really easy, but once you start getting into like a niche market, like we realized, for example, we put out a survey and realized over 70% of our users are wedding photographers that have been in business for over 3 years. And over 60% of those are full-time photographers, right? We have a photographer software. We would have never guessed that. We probably would have guessed something, maybe 40% are wedding photographers, and majority of them are less than 3 years. So who you think you're building your software for isn't necessarily who's actually been attracted to your software. So you kind of have to realign and really stay focused as you build new features forward, who that person is. And that's just a very broad definition of our customer, right? So what's our technical capabilities of our customer? What's our, do they want like a really power user software? Do they want a simplified software, right? So you kind of have to balance all that and then try to keep it all very much in line with everything else that you're doing, right? You're building new features and stuff like that. So does it fit your product, right? You could build anything, you can have a million different widgets going on, but you have to question yourself every time you build something, you're adding more complexity. Is it worth the trade-off, right? Will enough people benefit from it, and will people benefit it enough to add complexity to something, right? I hope that answered the question in some way.
So, as a project manager, how do you mitigate risks and know when to take them? Do you already have like risks in mind when you're starting a project, or do you kind of go as you follow along, like identify them?
Your biggest risks, aside from your employees themselves, so you're looking at knowledge, for example. So does the employee actually have the knowledge to do it? Like we switched a lot of our components over to Angular, where we were doing more like PHP and jQuery kind of mix. So we switched it all over to a framework called Angular, right? Which is very JavaScript heavy, but it's very isolated in its own way, right? So it was definitely a learning curve for a couple of our programmers. So that was a risk. You had a lot of extra time, right? It comes down to time and money. So another risk with employees is they could quit, they could find another job. Well, as soon as they find another job, now you have to add time and money into finding somebody else and time and money into training. And you're gonna push time back, right? So you're gonna push dates back, deadlines back, and it's gonna cost more money in the end. So yeah, there's always those kind of risks involved. Your biggest risks are, in my opinion, aside from kind of employee quitting or getting sick or something, is not understanding the technology, so having to learn about the technology, or not understanding the best way to do it. Incurring technical debt. So technical debt is when you build something in such a way, you try to get a feature in such a way, but you know you're gonna have to double back one day to fix it, or you didn't make it in such a way that it's expandable. So one day, when you try to expand it, you're gonna have to rebuild it. So you become all of a sudden technical debt. So let's say you spent a month on that feature. In the future, you're gonna have to spend another month rebuilding it for some reason. So it's technical debt. Exactly,
So,
exactly. So that's a huge risk. And then, yeah, anything else that equates to just deadline slipping, right? So feature creep, all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
And in your time of being a project manager, what triple constraints do you find most important to follow? Quality, time, cost. You already kind of, yeah.
A little bit.
What's the hardest, quality, time, or cost? Time.
Time.
Yeah, because I mean, you always try to balance it to try to get on quality, right? You try to have a quality product, in our opinion. That's our philosophy, right? We don't want to just rush things out the door. We've done that in the past, and we've had to double in, so you get technical debt, right? As I just alluded to. So you definitely want to shoot for quality. When you shoot for quality, and you don't have a huge team, you're trying to manage costs as well, then of course time is limited, right? Every single time. So, yeah.